March 1987 brings us Crash issue 38, and we're back to an Oliver Frey cover, this one based on the games Feud and Ranorama reviewed this month. In this issue, Crash decided to revamp the rating system to judge games by the current standard and give a more even spread of ratings, rather than most games getting ratings in the 80s and 90s. Having said that, there were still many games getting ratings in the 80s this month, although only 2 Crash smashes. Let's see what those were. There were 2 games in 10th place with 67% this month. The first is Greyfell by Starlight Software. Subtitled The Life of Norman, in this 3D isometric arcade adventure you play a cat called Norman. Your quest is to free the land of Greyfell from the evil ruler Moron. This month, reviewers of arcade games were again Ben Stone, Paul Sumner and Mike Dunn. Ben described this as an impressive debut from Starlight. He was positive about the cute graphics, endearing characters and above average sound. However, the gameplay left him cold. Paul found that despite the flashy loader and pretty graphics, it was not a game that broke any new boundaries. On the whole, he found it a decent game that was worth a look. Mike also praised the excellent graphics but found the game too slow and ultimately lacking in the playability department. It is yet another isometric arcade game. Although the graphics are fairly sparse, the wells and crosses do a good job of conveying the fantasy setting. It's a shame that the game slows down when there's more happening on screen. The setting puts me somewhat in mind of Pentagram from issue 29. One key difference is that you can fight with and beat your antagonists. By this point this game doesn't seem particularly original, although I feel 67% is quite a harsh score. It's not that bad, and if you like fantasy based isometric 3D games, maybe worth a look. Next, in 10th place with 67%, we have Shockway Rider from Fast and Light. In this game you ride on moving walkways around a futuristic city, beating up muggers and attempting to complete a full circuit. Ben found this game to be a step back for Fast and Light from their previous Light Force. He enjoyed the gameplay, although felt that 8 levels wouldn't keep anyone playing for longer than a few days. Paul praised the originality and addictive qualities, although found it lost out in playability to Light Force. On the whole, he felt it was certainly a game to look at. Mike felt this was a simple idea and a reasonable game. He liked the excellent graphics and scrolling, and found it highly playable, although lacking in depth. He recommended you look before buying. Having been fairly impressed with Light Force, I was expecting good things from Fast and Light. Sadly, Shockway Rider doesn't quite live up to their good start. It's the kind of game that may have been impressive a couple of years before, but it just doesn't strike me as anything special by 1987. It somewhat has vibes of Frogger in the way that you can leap between lanes to avoid antagonists. Although it's a reasonably original idea, and good if you want an arcade game that's a bit different, I would concur with Crash's score on this one. In 9th place with 72% is Nuclear Countdown from Atlantis. This is a budget isometric 3D game set in a nuclear reactor going crazy. You control a droid and have to find and neutralise 4 neutrino cells before the time runs out. Ben found this to be an excellent piece of budget software. Although he found it too easy to offer lasting appeal, he found it playable and compelling with slick graphics. Paul described it as a great little game with superb presentation and good sound effects, although like Ben also found it too easy. Mike found it competent enough with quick and smooth although small graphics. Although he found nothing particularly amazing about the game, he felt it alright for the budget price of £1.99. This game was surprisingly good. It's yet another 3D isometric explorer, but with you controlling a droid that puts me somewhat in mind of Highway Encounter and Alien Highway, perhaps cross with spindles in that you're against the clock. Considerably different from those games though, and although you have many antagonists trying to get in your way, the game feels smooth and pacey. Certainly not of a Crash Smash standard, but a game that's worth a go or two. In 8th place, from Microprose, we have Silent Service with 80%. This is a submarine simulation set in World War II. As a war game, this was reviewed by Philippa Irvine in the strategy column. She found that Silent Service worked well conceptually, being a war game simulation that felt authentic. However, she felt that the implementation fell short of the promise of the game design, feeling like a straight translation of the Commodore 64 version, with a graphical style resembling the C64. She particularly noted the lack of sound, which contributed to a lack of atmosphere in the game. Whilst the instruction manual was detailed, the physical format was not great, 2 sheets of paper folded to get into a cassette box. On the whole, she felt that the designers had done a good job fitting an ambitious game environment into the 48K spectrum, but the game was uncompelling overall, even for simulation fans. I can't recall seeing any submarine simulations before this game. It's reasonably well presented. It's a shame the Spectrum's default character set is used, but the different screens you can go between as you play do well to present the information and provide variety. It's certainly not an easy game to get into, and one that needs a lot of reference to the manual at the start, with many keys to remember. One that simulation fans may want to try. It's certainly got a different feel to the many flight simulators, and is a game with a lot of depth, pun definitely intended. In 7th place with 85% is Annals of Rome from PSS. This game is a simulation of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire over several centuries. Again, this was reviewed in the strategy column. Philippa's biggest criticism was how slow the game was, with a lot of the game being written in BASIC. Although the nature of the game meant that it shouldn't be too affected by being slow, not everyone would find this playable. She criticised some phases of the game more than others. She felt that the phase in which you set the tax rate was badly presented, and hard to see how the choice affects the game outcome. However, the strategy phase was fascinating, allowing you to assign senators to the management of different territories. She found the military phase to be slow, and the execution of this phase to be clumsy and unprofessional, and felt that a little more speed would have made this more playable. Although she found the packaging up to PSS's usual laudable style, she described the cover art as excruciating, and the manual to be organised in a most unhelpful manner. On the whole, she liked the game despite its many faults. She found the scope captured the imagination, the game to be very satisfying to start with, but one that may become frustrating later. The layout of the game is good, with separate areas of the screen for the map and for the various statistics information the game gives you. The variety of fonts works well for presenting the information. My main criticism is the game tends to throw so much information at you, not really giving you a chance to read it or determine what is relevant. In between this, you get a chance to make some decisions. It's a very slow-paced game, not one that's likely to appeal to arcade action fans, but it's good to see a strategy game covering this time period, and may appeal to anyone that's interested in Roman history. In 6th place with 86% is Dodgy Geysers from Melbourne House. This is a text adventure in which you play a dubious character who has just been released from prison. You have to gather a gang and carry out a robbery to set yourself up financially. Derek Brewster reviewed this in the Adventure Trail column. He was initially unimpressed, describing the input routine as nothing short of diabolical. He found the presentation flat, with short, uninteresting location descriptions. However, he found the game did grow on you the more you played it. Although not the best programmed adventure ever, the humour of the game offered much amusement. This starts well with a location graphic that appears incredibly quickly and a unique narrative style. However, as you start to play, the negative of the features of the game soon become apparent. There are very few location graphics, but rather making up for that by good descriptions, the descriptions are also brief. There are some nice sequences, such as when you watch a dog race. The narrower character set is good and makes the game feel nicely presented, although the sensitivity of the keyboard is wrong. Some characters get repeated twice, other times key press is not recognised. It's always good to see an adventure that's not just the run-of-the-mill fantasy or science fiction, so this one may be worth a brief look if you enjoy adventures. In 5th place with 87% is Forgotten City from Hawk. This is a text adventure available by mail order that was produced by a team of 16-year-olds. In this adventure you search out the lost city of Atlantis to find the mythical power trident. Derek described the inlay as of a professional standard with a most readable storyline. He found this to be a cut above the usual mail order game, with Side A and Side B offering the same game but with different colour schemes. Although the location descriptions weren't particularly long and evocative, and the vocabulary was quite strict, he found it to be an engaging game with imaginative and colourful graphics. In some ways this has similar faults to Dodgy Geysers, in that there are few location graphics and the descriptions are brief. However, this is a game written with the quill, and this gives it an advantage of at least being responsive. The character set is not bad, giving this a slight futuristic vibe, and the game on the whole creates a good atmosphere. There's nothing particularly new here, but may be worth a look if you're keen on text adventures. In 4th place with 88% is The Legend of Apache Gold from Incentive Software, written by Pete Torrance, the author responsible for Subsunk from issue 18 and Sea-Base Delta from issue 30. This is a Western-themed text adventure developed using the graphic adventure creator, itself reviewed in issue 32. Derek described this game as having a rather scruffy look, with pictures that would be more expected in a budget game. But on the whole he found it an entertaining adventure which was far from difficult, offering much to both experienced adventurers and novices. Derek was never keen on the black text on white, and found the responsiveness reasonable, although not as good as the Quilled games. This didn't impress me to start with. I thought it was a nice enough graphic for the starting location, but the bog standard Spectrum font and black on a white background just makes it look like the basic interpreter. You start riding your horse along the plains, and I have to say I was mystified. Despite Derek describing this game as easy, the very first location hits you with a guess the verb puzzle. Not a great start. In a month that seems to be full of adventures, this was particularly unimpressive. In 3rd place we have another adventure from Incentive Software. This is Winter Wonderland with 89%. This is a text adventure set in the Himalayas. The game begins after your aircraft crashes on the way to an archaeological dig site. Derek liked this game. He found it well proportioned and nicely balanced, both in terms of story and difficulty. Although he sometimes felt that the game had inconsistencies, on the whole he found it reasonably intelligent. He thought the game would appeal to beginner and devotee alike, and particularly praised the well-constructed, imaginative location descriptions. Again created with graphic adventure creator, Derek found this a good example of what it could do. Although different in setting than The Legend of Apache Gold, the game feels similarly lacking in presentation. The graphics are a good representation of the snowy location, and this game at least eases you into the problems gradually. At least here the white background seems to fit the vibe of the game. I've not played too far into the game so far, but the graphics and descriptions create an atmosphere well. It's pleasant enough, but I can see why it's not really remembered these days. In second place, we're back to the arcade games. The first crash smash of this issue is Ranorama from Houston, scoring 90%. This game was developed by Steve Turner. In this game you've accidentally turned yourself into a frog and had your dungeon taken over by wizards. Your task is to find and defeat 96 wizards to win your freedom and be turned back into a human. Ben initially grimaced when he heard that Houston were doing a Gauntlet variant. However, he rated Ranorama as the most playable game reviewed this month. Paul felt that the Gauntlet style had been beautifully incorporated into a shoot-'em-up extravaganza. His only gripe was that sometimes your frog could be unresponsive, but otherwise found little wrong. Mike found that Ranorama wasn't the most addictive game he'd played, but a game that ought to last for a long time. Although instructiveness was sometimes lacking, on the whole he rated this as a great game and one to buy. It may be another Gauntlet variant, but this is a fine, well-produced game. Sound and animation are up there with the best of Spectrum games, and although the playing area sometimes seemed limited, this does well to create the claustrophobic feel of the dungeons. Graphically, it's better than Gauntlet reviewed last issue, having fantastic presentation and a good variation in colour. This is a game I missed on first release, and it's another gem well worth playing. In first place, a crash smash with 91%, is Feud from Bulldog Software. This is a 2D game with a fancy setting. You play the wizard Lyric and have to gather ingredients for spells to then attempt to defeat your brother, the wizard Lenoric. Paul described the graphics as the program's most outstanding feature, being extremely colourful, large and detailed. Mike rated Feud as really good. Although some of the graphical items could have been more realistic, he found the gameplay to be packed and the fun to continue even when you have the spells. For £1.99 he felt this was excellent value for money. Ben described this as completely brilliant. He said it was a real pleasure to see a cheapie that was as new in concept as this, and as playable. Although he found the screen flip annoying, he felt that the detail of the backgrounds and the superb animation of the characters made up for this. All reviewers were particularly impressed that this was the first game from a new label. This game is graphically superb, creating the fantasy landscape well, and is colourful without suffering from colour clash. The idea of the game is original, although initially seems quite slow going as you explore the landscape trying to gather ingredients for spells. I'm pretty sure this is a game I played back in the day, and is one that really demonstrated the quality of games coming out for the Spectrum in 1987. The fact that this was a budget game makes it even more impressive. Well worth playing. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see more videos about retro computing from Norlogic Retro.